In the 1970s, Arizona was the fastest growing state in the West, where a family could buy a brand new home for $30,000 and live through 18 straight days above 110 degrees Fahrenheit just to claim a piece of the desert. While the rest of America chased the familiar, newcomers here faced heat, hope, and wide open space. Was this really the new American frontier, or just a promise waiting to be tested? The answer begins where affordability met the sun. Heat shaped every hour of Arizona life in the 1970s. On summer mornings, window shades stayed drawn, and ceiling fans spun before the sun even cleared the rooftops. By midday, the world outside seemed to pause. Streets emptied, lawns shimmered, even birds fell silent. Inside, the steady hum of swamp coolers and air conditioning became the soundtrack of survival. Evaporative coolers, known as swamp coolers, were everywhere. They gulped up to 100 gallons of water a day, blowing cool, damp air through pads that needed constant tending. In June of 1974, Phoenix endured 18 days in a row above 110 degrees. Power grids strained as every household pushed their cooling systems to the limit. Some families, when the air conditioning failed, carried mattresses out to the patio and slept under the stars, hoping for a breeze. Central air was spreading fast, especially in new subdivisions, but it was still a luxury for many. Older homes relied on window units or patched-together coolers, sometimes both running side by side. During the summer monsoon, humidity rose and swamp coolers lost their edge, leaving rooms sticky and restless. People adapted with quiet routines. Errands finished before 10. Long afternoons spent indoors. Social visits shifted to dusk. Architectural choices reflected the climate, too. Stucco walls and tile roofs deflected the sun's glare. Deep eaves and shaded patios became essential, not decorative. Water use spiked, but few questioned it. Staying cool was a matter of comfort and at times safety. Each evening, as the sun dropped behind the mountains, doors and windows opened to let in whatever relief the desert air could offer. The rhythm of daily life followed the temperature, and everyone learned to read the signs. The first whir of the cooler in May, the heavy stillness of July, the brief electric scent of rain in August. In Arizona, adapting to the heat was not just a habit, it was the foundation for everything else that followed. A young family from Illinois stepped off the bus in Mesa in the spring of 1972, blinking into the bright desert light. They carried 2 suitcases, a box of winter coats, and a letter from a cousin promising that they could buy a house for less than a new car back home. The numbers backed it up, and the place felt affordable. In Phoenix and its suburbs, the price of a new 3-bedroom tract house hovered between $25,000 and $35,000, little more than half the cost of a similar home in Los Angeles, and even less compared to the Midwest cities they left behind. For many, the dream of homeownership wasn't just possible here. It was advertised on billboards and in full-page newspaper spreads. Developers like those behind Dobson Ranch in Mesa and Noel Homes in Tempe rolled out entire neighborhoods overnight, each street lined with fresh stucco and gravel yards waiting for their first trees. Moving vans rumbled in from Michigan, Ohio, and California, unloading crates of family photographs, kitchen tables, and the hope that things would be easier under the Arizona sun. The neighborhoods filled with voices from everywhere but here, accents from Chicago, Detroit, and Des Moines drifting over cinder block fences. Children learned to ride bikes on streets with names like Desert Flower and Sunland, surrounded by empty lots that promised parks and schools to come. For these arrivals, the desert felt unfinished, wide open, and forgiving. The cost of living left room for possibility. A single-wage earner, often a teacher, mechanic, or store clerk, could afford a mortgage and still have dollars left for a backyard pool or a second-hand pickup. The 1965 construction strike had left a backlog of homes to be retrofitted, so families sometimes moved into houses with swamp coolers and watched as central air was installed one room at a time. In the evenings, porch lights flickered on across the new subdivisions. Neighbors introduced themselves over chain-link fences, swapping stories about snowstorms and city traffic they had left behind. Arizona in the 1970s was a place to start over, where arrival itself felt like a kind of accomplishment. The desert didn't ask for history, it offered a clean slate, and for thousands of families that was enough. Hammer strikes and saw blades filled the mornings in Arizona's new subdivisions. Construction crews started at dawn, racing the heat, pouring foundations and framing houses while the sun still sat low. For many, the work was relentless, 6 days a week, sometimes 7, as the desert seemed to demand more homes, more shopping centers, more schools with every passing month. A foreman named Ray, who had come from Ohio in 1970, remembered the dust clinging to his boots and the taste of warm water from plastic jugs lined up in the shade. Paychecks came steady, not spectacular, but there was always another job waiting. In Phoenix, Mesa, and Tempe, the skyline changed almost overnight. Malls like Tri-City and Metro Center opened their doors, promising air-conditioned relief and endless parking. Each new building meant more jobs, from electricians and roofers to the clerks stocking shelves behind glass storefronts. The rhythm of growth was physical, sunburned arms, sweat-soaked shirts, and the constant thud of progress echoing across empty lots. But not every corner of Arizona felt the same surge. In copper towns like Morenci and Ajo, 1977 brought a hard downturn. The price of copper dropped, and with it the certainty of a miner's wage. Union newsletters from that year told of layoffs and families scraping by on seasonal work, the desert wind carrying rumors of better prospects in the city. Some miners packed up and joined the construction crews in Phoenix, trading the roar of the mine for the racket of nail guns and cement mixers. Others stayed, hoping the market would turn. The contrast was sharp. One part of the state swelling with newcomers and new money, another tightening its belt, waiting out the slump. Still, the sense of motion was everywhere. Work in Arizona in the 1970s meant moving earth, raising walls, and building lives from the ground up. The desert offered no guarantees, but for those willing to work, there was always something rising on the horizon. A pickup truck heads east on the new Superstition Freeway, dashboard cracked from years of sun, the bench seat hot even after sunset. In 1971, the freeway opened its first major stretch from Power Road, and by the end of the decade it reached nearly to Apache Junction. Each new mile of pavement cut commute times nearly in half, drives that once took 45 minutes on surface roads now finished in 20 or 30 minutes. For families in the swelling suburbs of Mesa and Tempe, these roads turned the desert from a barrier into a bridge. The rhythm of life in Arizona stretched out with the highways. A construction worker might leave a neighborhood in Dobson Ranch before dawn, windows down to catch the last cool air, and glide past fields and new shopping centers on Interstate 17 or U.S. Highway 60. The Black Canyon Freeway, widened through the mid-1970s, carried retirees north to Sun City and workers toward Phoenix rising towers. By 1976, traffic studies showed that these expansions shaved 15 to 20 minutes off daily trips, making far-flung communities feel suddenly close. Pickups ruled the roads. By 1975, they made up nearly a third of all vehicles in Maricopa County, outnumbering sedans for the first time. Ford F-100s, Chevy C-10s, and battered Dodges hauled lumber, groceries, and kids in swim trunks. The heat left its mark. Steering wheels blistered, seat belts burned, and vinyl upholstery split open after years of afternoons of 110 degrees. Drivers kept towels or blankets on the seats, and everyone learned to crack a window, even for the shortest stop. Distance shaped daily habits. Grocery runs, school drop-offs, and weekend outings all depended on a reliable engine and a full tank. Long stretches of empty highway became part of the landscape, a place to think, to listen to the radio, to watch the sun drop behind the mountains. As dusk settled, headlights flickered on across the valley, and pickups funneled toward town centers, ready for the promise of a desert night. By nightfall, the desert heat faded, and a different kind of energy took over Arizona's new towns. On Mill Avenue in Tempe, the lights of the library flickered on, drawing students and young workers out of apartments and tract houses. Inside, the air buzzed with talk and the clink of bottles, the stage crowded with amps and battered guitars. Bands like Redemption and the Pistoleros played a sound that was all their own, a tangle of country, rock, and something dustier, shaped by the open roads and late-night drives. Covers were cheap, usually $1 or $2, and the crowd was a mix of Arizona State University students, local kids, and newcomers still learning the rhythm of desert nights. College radio stations like KZSU kept the scene connected, broadcasting live sets and spinning local records across the valley. The playlists mixed Southwest rock with country ballads and blues, creating a soundtrack that felt both restless and music that felt rooted. On a Friday night in 1976, you might catch Gamble Rogers playing a folk set at a student co-op, or stumble into Chandler's for a Mill Avenue hoedown, the whole place moving to the beat of boots on sticky floors. Evenings stretched long, cooled by laughter and music drifting out onto the sidewalks. Phoenix, with its polished lounges and resort bars, felt a world away from Tempe's scruffy optimism. Tucson's scene, more experimental, drew a different crowd. But in these new towns, culture was not inherited. It was made fresh every night, by people who had arrived from somewhere else and decided to stay. For a young musician at Arizona State University, every set was a chance to invent a new tradition, to turn the unfinished desert into a place that sounded like home. At sunrise, the first golf carts rolled out along the manicured greens of Sun City. By 1975, this age-restricted community north of Phoenix had become a prototype for retirement living in America. Residents here had chosen a new kind of life, one where time slowed and the routines of work faded into mornings spent on the fairway or afternoons at the pool. The rules were clear: no children overnight, quiet after dark, and every yard trimmed to match the neighbors. For many, these boundaries offered comfort, a sense that they had earned this peace after decades elsewhere. The economic impact was impossible to miss. Retirees brought steady pensions and Social Security checks, filling local shops, restaurants, and medical offices year-round. Winter brought a second wave, the snowbirds arriving from Minnesota, Michigan, and Canada, swelling Sun City's population by thousands. Grocery stores stocked up on grapefruit and rye bread. Churches held double services. The golf courses, open 12 months a year, became the heart of social life, with tea times booked weeks in advance and tournaments organized by the Homeowners Association. One resident, a former school principal from Cleveland, described her first season like this. "We played 9 holes at dawn, then coffee at the clubhouse. By noon it was too hot, so we read, played cards, or went for a swim. I felt younger with every day. Homeowners meetings shaped everything from landscaping standards to pool hours, with debates as lively as any city council. The pace was gentle, but the sense of ownership ran deep. Sun City was more than a place to retire. It was a new idea of community, where people rewrote their daily lives on their own terms. In the quiet of the afternoon, as sprinklers clicked on and golf balls arced against the pale sky, it was easy to believe that the desert could offer a fresh start at any age. On a Saturday morning in Tucson, the scent of roasting chilies drifted from the kitchen, mixing with the warmth of tortillas on the griddle. The table might hold eggs scrambled with green onions, a bowl of frijoles, and a pitcher of orange juice from backyard trees. In the 1970s, Arizona's food was shaped by the border and by the people arriving from the Midwest and beyond, each family blending their own traditions with Sonoran staples. At family-run cafes, enchiladas and tamales were served alongside hamburgers and club sandwiches, with menus that changed as new cooks arrived. Places like El Charro in Tucson or Macayos in Phoenix became community landmarks, where regulars gathered after church, Little League, or a long shift. Eating out wasn't reserved for special occasions. It was woven into the week, a way to cool off with a cold soda and in a plate of carne asada. Home kitchens borrowed flavors from both sides of the border, turning the ordinary act of dinner into a quiet celebration of where you had come from and where you had landed. At Kyrene Elementary, the principal's notes from 1978 read like a tally of improvisations. 24 students to a room, lunch periods staggered into mid-afternoon, and 3 trailer classrooms delivered by flatbed in the middle of July. Enrollment had doubled in less than a decade, and every patch of open ground became a playground or a makeshift classroom. Teachers shared supplies and sometimes even desks, while parents lined up at school board meetings to ask when the next bond would pass. The sense of possibility that filled new neighborhoods came with growing pains. Hallways were packed, buses ran double routes, and the echo of construction could be heard just beyond the fence. Beyond the schoolyard, the desert reminded everyone of its own limits. In late summer, a wall of dust could rise without warning, turning the sky orange and swallowing the horizon. These storms, called haboobs, swept through with a force that left grit in every corner and sent children racing indoors. At home, swamp coolers kept running, drawing up to 100 gallons of water each day, enough to make families wonder, sometimes quietly, how long the desert could keep giving. Arizona's growth felt unstoppable, but the realities of space, water, and weather pressed in at the edges, asking for patience and adaptation. Arizona's population more than doubled in the 1970s, as new arrivals turned open land into thriving neighborhoods, proof that possibility can reshape even the harshest landscape. That legacy of reinvention still defines the Southwest, where migration and adaptation fuel ongoing change. Whenever we wonder what the desert can offer, we are living out the same question they once answered. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Arizona's wide-open past.